Hi guys, it's been a while. A minute or two. After a long summer hiatus, I'm now fairly earnestly getting back into doing some work on the construction set and on the amalgamation. We have pretty much finished up with Erengard Mines, which is where I last left off in my last broadcast. The final issues there, just to get everybody up to date, were a few little things that I chalk up to maybe not doing quite as much testing by the original author. Graphite did this wonderful little mod, which is a money generator for anyone playing Morrowind who wants a business to run, and it's a mine, a diamond mine that you can set up, and after making some initial investments in the mine, you can earn money from the work that is done in the mine. You keep it stocked with liquor and food, and pretty much it's self-perpetuating, and then you can just collect money indefinitely from it, so that can help build your in-game wealth as you go along. Just a few things that were picked up on by myself. There were just a few little dialogue hitches, I think, that you could say about it. Now, one thing was, I thought that perhaps you might need to touch the money chest that's in there. There's a money chest in there, and I thought you might have to touch it to update the dollar amount before investing in some of the infrastructure in it. I don't think that's the case. I got a little bit, shall we say, turned around by the idea that in the crafting amalgamated portion of my work, that component of the amalgamation crafting portion, there is actually a point where you have to touch a fire pit a couple of times, or at least once, ahead of doing any work on it, because there's a chance of getting a false negative where it says you don't have enough bottles to create dyes. In the dye making scripts, there's a problem with where the global is positioned and where it's meant to be updated, and so it doesn't update right away, so you have to activate the fire pit, and then you can go ahead and proceed with the task. But I don't think that's the case in the Erengard mine. It seems to work anyway, so that's probably a redundancy that I put in. Probably isn't needed. I might take it out again. There were a couple of actual outright errors. A wrong speaker was given in one of the topics, so I corrected that. Did probably a little bit of logistical betterment by changing the order of one of the topics in the way the dialogue entries appear. Not a big deal there, and this one maybe also needed to be reordered. One of the entries where I can't think of a place I'd rather be working was the entry, and I think it worked better when it was reordered. And then guards were assigned wrong classes, so I fixed that. They weren't speaking their dialogue parts because they weren't given the class that was originally intended when Graphite created them. So just a few little things to pick up on. Nothing major, nothing that would break the whole mod by any stretch, and stuff you probably wouldn't even notice in the course of playing it. But those are the corrections made, so that was it. Erengard Mines. Do have a little bit more testing to do. I have to do an outright prioritized test of that to make sure everything works as intended 100%. But then I think think can be considered pretty much 100% done. I haven't checked in the hidden portion of the cavern to see what's in there. I still to this day, after playing this mod for so long, I don't know what's in the hidden portion behind the closed door, the locked door. And so I got to find out what's going on there to make sure that this thing is still functioning the way it was intended all the way along. But yay, Erengard Mines pretty much done. And so with that behind us, now I'm going on to White Wolf. Now what prompted this is the fact that I was getting errors popping up from one of the scripts of White Wolf of Loken Mountain. Now White Wolf of Loken Mountain, primarily created by Emma, to my understanding, with a lot of help from other scripters along the way, actively or passively. Felix, the other Felix, Grumpy, people like that. White Wolf is very companion dependent. It's got a nice quest line. I think some elements of it were slightly broken in the original, if I remember correctly, but nothing that was too catastrophic. But in subsequent overview of White Wolf of Loken Mountain, I did discover some actual game crashing errors, and I'll go over to those in a second. But it's a nice mod, very atmospheric. There's a nice quest associated with it, a bunch of minor quest lines, and as I say, very companion driven. I think I haven't played it all the way through. I played a vast majority of it, but I haven't gotten to a point. I believe there's an actual marriage that can take place with your character or something, and yeah, so it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to play, but like some mods out there, I think it suffers from a lot of the mechanics are maybe a little bit deficient. So we have gone into looking at just how we can tidy it up, which is my process for making mods work maybe a little more efficiently, a little more correctly, and correct any improprieties, errors, conflicts that might occur with other mods, that sort of thing. Having said that, I probably created a couple of conflicts by the processes that I'm undertaking here, but just to give you an overview then of what I discovered in White Wolf, well, why I say it may need a fair bit of help is because I go through several stages of starting off by renaming things that I think can stand to be changed for consistency, making them items more unique so that in a project like the amalgamation that I'm undergoing here, they can coexist together without bumping into each other conflict-wise. It makes more intuitive sense, things like that. And so my process generally involves, I'll go to the change log and show you what I've done on it already. I usually start with renaming variables, and then I go into renaming scripts, and then I'll go into renaming other things as I feel they are needed, usually actors in the games, the NPCs, because they're most heavily involved in scripts and dialogue. And then other things as perhaps I desire. Most likely journal entries will be renamed to add consistency to the whole package. And then I look for other things. At this point, I don't usually continue much further than that, although many other elements and categories of a mod, of an ESP can be changed. Usually those are sufficient to add stability and consistency to the game. and correct most of the errors and add efficiency. So usually that's where I leave it, unless I see something egregious, like in Tamriel Rebuilt. I didn't like the way containers were named. They used a hyphen, and a hyphen is probably not the best way to name ID of an object using hyphens in it. So I renamed containers in Tamriel Rebuilt. And so, why, is this something that can work, is made to, can make the things better? I think so. In my experience, I think it's being proven as I go along. The more and more of this that I do, I think the better the game tends to run. I know it can be done because Tamriel Rebuilt, big job, and I did it. I did all this process, renaming the globals and scripts and everything as I saw fit. And in my course of playing Tamriel Rebuilt since then, that's map 1, the first one with all the quests and everything. Everything seems to be working more or less fine. I haven't found any major game-breaking hitches that I've created, so I still get the occasional crash in that. That was something that's carryover from the original. I don't know why running around in the countryside would cause the game to crash necessarily. It does sometimes. And there's the odd thing here and there, little minor bits and pieces that'll be addressed as time goes on. But by and large, it works really quite well. So I'm hoping for the same here. I've already proven that Haldenshore, my tidy of Haldenshore, my tidy of Havish I'm going through right now with another character. It seems to be working more or less fine. So these tidy processes are something that I think I will pursue and continue with, and am quite pleased with how they pan out. So looking at, why I was getting an error message quite often when I was loading my game based on White Wolf, I don't exactly know at this point. We'll find out as we go along. But I can tell you that, as I say, we had, in an overview of the mod, I found at least a couple of errors in scripts that are potentially game crashing. There were some bad nesting where there was too many like and ifs in terms of if and ifs kind of structures within there. I also saw some elements that were actually syntactically incorrect. And while the game still attempted to play them and could probably play them, it added instability. And so maybe that's where things like that were arising, where I was getting that error message showing up. So in my overview, I look at, as I say, the things that I want to tackle. And I start usually with the variables, go to the scripts, probably the NPCs, journals, and journal entries, and then probably I'll leave it at that, and then I'll look for anything that's egregiously outstanding, like an extraordinarily long ID for a weapon or a piece of armor or something like that, and maybe truncate that somehow and just make the whole thing a little bit more tight. Okay, so I have already done at this point the variables, and I'm in the midst of changing the script names. Now, with the variables, okay, the procedure on these is always a interesting logistic to tackle, and how best to go about doing this. What I've arrived at lately is usually why I want to change the variables is to get rid of things like the underscores, add, as I say, consistency, and maybe a little bit more uniqueness to each of the values. I find that that's probably best achieved by an export-import function. Now, in the past, what I've usually done is I've gone through these one by one, where I will open up the construction set, put in a value into the find text here, and then my right-hand man, so to speak, MW edit, do a search in there as well for same value, and see where it shows up in the mod. That sometimes doesn't work to find every instance of where a variable can be changed. So what usually is the most accurate way of doing that is to do an export. So you go into, you load up your mod and you export your dialog into a file of your own choosing. I usually choose just new dialog. I don't want to work on all the master dialogue from Morrowind Tribunal and Blood Moon. I just want to work on the stuff from the mod. So I export new dialogue to a file. It gives a huge file, and within that, though, you can do a search. I usually use WordPad at this point as my tool for going through those big, huge files. And I do a search. I'll see if I can bring up an example of one of those. Let's see, where would it be? Restore, White Wolf. Maybe I'll do MWAM main here. It might be even more. So you get a huge file like this, which is an export from my amalgamation. And this shows you all the dialogue and all the filters and everything that are present in the game. And I find that the construction set is the best tool for exporting the dialogue in that fashion, because everything is included, all the filters, and it's all nicely tabulated and stuff, and it usually goes back in when you import it back into the exact order that it was exported in. And it's very nice that way. I haven't found any tool that does it better than that. So then you would open up something like this and then find the one that you want to change. Let's see if this one is still in existence in that old file. So then I would go replace, and I would find the variable that I want to change, and then what I want to change it to, which is my renaming here. And then I would go through, and now it's probably not going to work. Bad example then. Anyway, that's the idea, and that works for all the variables that you care to go through and change in that fashion, hard and easy as they may be. Some of them are harder because I like to change some of the variables from a common word, such as warp was one that I just finished doing. Actually, let's try something like weapon type as a local. Maybe that would be. Now let's put in a junk. Still isn't going to work, is it? I don't know why. Pulled up a bad example there as far as that file is concerned, the export file. But anyway, that's the idea, how I go about changing them. So I've done that with all of these variables, starting with the globals because they're easiest to change, and I have a very consistent naming scheme for changing the globals, starting with the prefix VG for variable global, and then followed by 2 or 3 letters which are indicative of the mod from which they are derived, LK in this case. So instead of your globals all being scattered throughout under various different names that have no bearing on the mod that they arrive from, here the prefix is always VGLK. In the case of Loken Mountain, LK standing for Loken, White Wolf of Loken Mountain, and all the globals now start with that, almost all of them. And so they're all bunched together and consistent in that fashion. But anyway, yeah, so I then will export a dialogue and script files in textual form and make the changes using the replace feature in WordPad. Go through, make those changes. And as I say, something like a word like warp, which is very common, you have to be very careful going through so that you don't change it in places where it shouldn't be changed. Anyway, you come out in the end with all your substitutions made. Now, the big logistical problem with doing it in that fashion, while it may be better for accuracy, it does lend to a procedural problem insofar as when you go to import your work back into the mod, that doesn't work very well. It works as far as scripts go, it works great. And by scripts, I'm also talking about the results in dialogue. But where it doesn't work is in filters. So if you've made a change to a variable name in the mod where the filters call for that variable in here, they will quite often be missing. It will just miss them. And I've tried various kinds of procedures to try to see if there is an order that is involved. Usually the scripts I export using RyMash here, and then you click on a mod and you go export scripts. I don't do the dialogue through RyMash. It's not as complete as what you do in using the construction set. But I do use the script export in RyMash. It does a great job. You do have to recompile the scripts after doing that. And I've tried, as I say, doing it in different orders, whether I recompile the scripts first and then import my work in the dialogue files back into the construction set. File, import data, dialogue from the file that I just finished changing, or whether I import the dialogue first and then recompile the scripts, whatever. The dialogue variables are dependent on the scripts. So your variables are declared in scripts, and then those declarations are what form the basis for any variables that you put into your filters here. Local variable here, for example, AAXX, and blah, blah, blah. So these, if you go to re-import, if you had a local variable that looked like that, for example, and you go to re-import it into your mod, that local variable will not show up. So then, I go, well, what's better? Should I just do it all manually by hand? But either way, you're going to have to go through each of these entries one after the other and check them in the final analysis anyway. So I figure, well, what the heck? See, here's a global in this entry in White Wolf, random 100. Well, that's pretty standard across the board for all mods based on the masters in Morrowind. So that one's going to still be here. Function PCSEX also will still remain because it's a universal that will apply to any mod. But I see a couple of blanks here indicating to me that maybe some of the specific mods, specific variables to this mod did get missed. And so I will have to go back and check all of these entries against the original mod to see which ones need to be reinstated. And it's a big, long job, but it would have to be done regardless of whether I did this all manually or whether I used the export-import procedure that I just described. Okay, so that's how I do the variables. Beyond that, I probably will do everything manually in terms of renaming scripts, renaming NPCs, renaming journal entries. Now, as if I recall correctly, I think maybe journal entries are pretty good because you can just rename it within the construction set with the mod up, and it will automatically update any dialogue entries that have that journal filtered into it. And the same will probably go for NPCs for the most part. So that's great. That's something you can just do manually, and immediately that you change the item name, whether it be journal or whether it be an object like an NPC, rename them there. That should probably translate all the way through the entire mod as far as dialogue anyway, and then you'll just have to worry about scripts and results for those. Again, verifying when you go through and do a final check against the original mod to see what is present and what's missing. Okay, so that's it as far as procedure goes. Now, just an overall philosophy note here about this and what led me to do tidies like this in the first place. But in an overall sense, okay, let's bring up the some of the scripts here. Scripts are a good example because they're usually where you find the most stuff. I'm going to let's bring up the original. Scripts are, when you're filtering in dialogue and stuff, you're not really going to come across syntactical errors because you're choosing from drop-down boxes, but syntactical errors, detritus, that kind of stuff will be most evident in scripts themselves. So let's bring up White Wolf of Loken Mountain Original. I'll set it active. This is in MW Edit. And I'll give you an example. I think one of these character ones here, Wolfram 2 is the first one I think I worked on. Yeah. Okay, so let's do let's do a little side-by-side comparison here. Bearing in mind these are only partially done. Okay, showing the difference between the tidied script and the untidied script partially thus far. But you'll see in the original what you get is stuff like this. Now, I think it's great to put your stuff out with as many notes as possible and show people exactly what it is that's going on behind the scenes to make your mod work, your scripts in particular. And so you see a lot of notes here, and you see the variables are well spelled out. They're very verbose, and so you know what they're talking about when they've been named and things like that. However, well, in the course of, if you're just playing like the Morrowind Master Files and a standalone mod, Morrowind, Tribunal, Blood Moon, plus White Wolf of Loken Mountain, and maybe a couple of other, like, Better Bodies or something like that, Morrowind patch, official patch project or something like that to make your game run better. When you're just limiting your mod list to a short list like that. It's no big deal. You're not going to notice anything about how any of this works. I think when it does start to make a difference is when you get something like what I'm working with in the amalgamation here. We've got MWAM main here, my main, one of two main huge amalgamation files. I look at the size of it, 189 plus megabytes. So that just goes to show you the scope of what it is we're dealing with here. And when you get into that territory, when you start adding mod after mod after mod, then you're looking at this all adds up. You know, the verbosity of the variables, the fact that all these comments are included in script after script after script. It adds a huge amount of bulk and is bloating your software, basically. It's bloating your data. And so I think it's great, as I say, to put this out there, but I would say to the original authors, if you are a modder, my philosophy is, yeah, put out a version that looks like this so that people like me or anybody else who wants to go along and improve your mod in some fashion or another can see exactly what it is that's at work behind the scenes here. But if you're serious about your mod and you're not just like, oh, well, you know, throw it out there and go on to the next, then you might want to take the extra step of tidying it up, like I'm doing with all of these mods, as you can see. Here are the variables I was talking about that I've renamed, a lot of them. So you have something here, for example, that says current hand-to-hand. Well, that pretty well spells it out what it is, but it's awfully verbose. So I've made a consistent little naming scheme, and I'll bring up the name scheme too so you can see that. Let's go over here. So for skills and attributes, to begin with, I've created a scheme here where each attribute and each skill have a 3-letter acronym. They're unique, they're non-conflicting, they're short, sweet, to the point, they're consistent, they're all 3 letters long, and they stand for all of the various attributes and skills that people will talk about in terms of what they use in their variables and stuff in the mods. So that is what forms the basis for how I've renamed some of these variables here, as you can see. Now again, yeah, you're not going to be able to tell what this is talking about if you look at this only. And that's why I think it is important to put out working copies of what it is that's going on behind the scenes in your mod, just like is done here. But when it comes down to actually putting out a finished copy of your mod that is intended for actual gameplay, it might not be a bad idea to go through a process like this, a tidy process like this. Definitely want to check for errors. And as I say, I've found syntactical errors in some of these scripts that have potential frustration components built into them, which will cause your game to misfire in some fashion or another. And yeah, that kind of thing. So this is what I'm all about here when I'm going through like this, and saying that, yeah, put out the blueprints of your game, yes, for sure, but I think also make it clear that that is like a working copy. And then if you have the wherewithal, go that extra step further and make your your mod really efficient and non-conflicting and have all the elements in it unique so that it is intuitive and consistent and doesn't bump up against other mods or other elements within a mod in terms of dialogue or those kind of any other kind of entries that might share your name with variables or script names or anything like that. So again, here with the script names, for example, SCLK, again, SC, a truncation standing for the category of script, LK denoting the mod that it comes from, LK being short for White Wolf of Loken Mountain, LK, Loken, as opposed to AA, Wolfram 2 script, which gives no indication of authorship or any, that I can tell. I don't know. I think AA was just used as a matter of convenience so that all the scripts would appear near the top of a script list when you loaded it, like this, which is fine, again, and handy for when you're working on it and behind the scenes and formulating the thing. But when it comes to actually making the final product, probably better to have it looking something like this, SCLK, where LK stands for Loken, and then I've got SCUG for the underground, and SCFTG for Five Toes Guild, and all the scripts are uniquely named according to the mod from which they're derived. So the way I look at it is this in an overall philosophical sense and using a metaphor. When you go to build a building, yeah, you're going to have workers everywhere, and you're going to have blueprints, and you're going to have notes in your field reports scrawled in the margins and everything like that. And you're going to have lumber and metal everywhere, all scattered around, and tools and mayhem and so forth in the course of putting up the building. But in the final analysis, when all the work is done and the workers clear out and you're having people getting ready to occupy your building, it's finished, man. The walls are straight. The wall board is nicely sanded and put together. It's all painted over nicely. The carpet is laid. The windows are sealed properly, and there isn't scribbled notes all over the walls telling how you went about building the walls. They're all finished and clean. And I understand, you're building a mod, and you're excited about it. And as I say, White Wolf is a nice mod. It's got some nice gameplay to it, and atmospheric and interesting and all that. And so you're excited and you want to get this out there to show your creative skills, and you do it and you put it out, and you got this that's here as far as the how the working elements behind all the material that's put into the mod is still showing in that, and you don't really care because you're really excited about how people are going to respond to the gameplay, and that's cool. Or you run out of time, or people just run out of interest. Who wants to go through what I'm going through in tidying up the stuff? Thanks, very domesticated. I'll be posting this onto YouTube. I think I'll if I can remember how to download this video, I'll put it back up on. I'll put it onto YouTube. So if you want to follow any more before I'm finished, or if you finish before I am, then you can go back and see the last half of what I'm talking about. Anyway, so yeah, and people lose interest. Okay, Morrowind, great. I've done my thing there. I've made my mark. Now it's time to go into Minecraft. Whatever. I understand that. But if, as I say, you're really serious about your modding work and you want it to stand the test of time. Now, I know I'm working on the construction set, and I know a lot of people have migrated over to like Lua. It seems to be the current trend in terms of putting mods out there. I don't know to what degree Lua will do this kind of work for you. I don't know how good it is in picking up errors or providing, if people have made tools to help use it better so that it is more idiot-proof, if you want to put it that way. I'm not familiar with Lua at all. But I think the same principles would still apply. You know, if you've got stuff that's kind of bulking up your mod, left over, maybe is unclear, inconsistent, or bumping into other elements of your mod, go through, you know, fix it up, tidy it up, make it look better, and perhaps it'll stand the test of time and add a little bit more stability and less frustration in terms of gameplay and people who actually want to look at your work and follow it along. Now, of course, I can't do this without mentioning that, yeah, you can't just barge through and make changes like this without referring back to the original mod, so that if anybody comes along and wants to look at my work and examine how I've messed up or whatever, they have to be able to refer back to where my decisions were derived. And so therein a key becomes very, very important. So you must document all the changes that you're making and relate it back to what was originally going on, so that people can refer back and say, oh, okay, I see why you made this change, because it refers back to such and such a script or whatever. And, you know, okay, now I know where you're at. Takes a little bit more work and a little more sleuthing sometimes to go back to the underpinning reasons why I made a change to a particular element, but at least the documentation is there and it can be done. Okay, so yeah, so that's it basically, and I'm finished with the variables. As I say, I've got them down to my satisfaction, and we'll be moving on to the other categories. I'm currently halfway through the scripts. I'll do a little bit of that right now so that you can see the process in actual action, and then we'll end this discourse for today. But yeah, just to let you know some of the underlying procedures, rationale, and philosophies behind what is going on when I'm working in the construction set and doing these so-called tidy processes that I'm undergoing. All right, so let us kill off these examples now, and we will go to the actual work. So where did I leave off? So I think I'm not going to need the original mod right at the moment, so I'm going to kill that. So what I've got up here is my current work, current changes in Morrowind Amalgamated, the White Wolf Standalone, MW Edit, which has the Morrowind Amalgamated loaded in it with a null file set to active as a safeguard to prevent me from saving if I accidentally hit the save button, to prevent me saving to what I would prefer to save in the construction set. And then I've got a copy of the standalone, which I've set active, and that just gives me an idea of my progress. So as I said before, here are the scripts that I've renamed already and the ones that have yet to be renamed. I should point out I'm doing all of this without permission from the original authors, and so whether any of this gets put into the public venues is going to be up to, if not the original authors, then community guidelines. And so some of this may or may not ever see the light of day as far as you as a player are concerned, but the intent is that these are going to work better than the original, at least as good as the original, but just maybe, you know, behind the scenes a little nicer. and so hopefully the original authors won't have any issues with them, or if there are issues, I make it well known that if you want to use them, you can use them. If you don't, you don't. Okay, so I was looking at, so what I usually do when I'm renaming the scripts is I go through and I look for patterns. So the pattern that I found here has to do with there are a number of common types of actions assigned to some of the various characters that make up the main storyline of the mod, of the quest lines of the White Wolf. You got characters like Wolfram, Sigrid, Liot, Lorena, and so forth, and I find that a lot of these scripts pertain to each of these characters, so I've kind of renamed in a fashion such that the characters get their scripts kind of grouped together a little bit better than what they might already be. And then I look for types of actions that might be being applied across the board. So here are a number of scripts to do with door activation and whether or not you, say, possess a key. For example, like this, you activate a door, and if you haven't got the right key, or then you get a message that says the door is sealed, cannot be opened without the right key. So those kind of scripts. So I've grouped them all together, so they're a little less haphazardly named throughout the mod. So in my next grouping that I see, I've noticed these things here that all have a sort of a similar structure, name-wise. So I'm going to go after them. And again, you can see that probably they are separated according to character. So here's one for Wolfram, and the scripts seem to be non-com, character name, and then cast. And then you have version 1 and a version 2 for some reason. So the first thing I'm going to do is, okay, so I've got an overview in my mind of how I'm going to name these. So I'm going to go with probably SCLK for the prefix, and then non-com, and then character name, truncated. I've got a little list of here how I'm truncating the character names. And make them all consistent in that regard. They're all pretty consistent anyway. So I'm just going to tighten them up a little bit, get rid of the underscore, put a better prefix, and maybe a little more consistency to their character name into the script. So not a big change. But what I'll have to do first of all is see where it is the scripts occur throughout the mod. And I've actually examined these beforehand. It looks to me like half of them, one version of them is actually not even being used. So let me just go ahead and check against what MWEdit says where these scripts are being used. And actually maybe I will change my mind on that and actually bring up the original just as a more thorough check, a double check, to see that I haven't made any modifications to the standalone that didn't get carried over from the original. And it's going to give me a false positive or false negative. Okay, first of all, we hit the sort feature and make sure all the scripts are sorted alphabetically, and I go to the original names. Now actually these will probably be more or less the same across the standalone from the original, I'm thinking. But since I've done things like change variable names already and some script names, and I've recompiled the scripts, I just want to be sure. And so I'm going to the horse's mouth, as it were, straight to the original mod to make sure that I get it right from there, whether or not these scripts actually, where the scripts show up from, where they're used category by category. So yes, I'm going to open up the original also in the construction set. Particularly knowing what I know about how I think they have a bit of an anomaly here. Okay, so MW edit. This script here, AA, non-com wolf cast 2, uses info, nothing. Aha, interesting. I'm going to copy the script name. Now I'm going to put it into the construction set and do a search there. See where it shows up. Excuse me. Nothing. Tickle in the throat. So right off the bat, I am suspicious of that script. And particularly when I bring up this script and compare it to the counterpart here. They essentially do the same thing by the looks of it. Except for this one that I just checked, it has this little line in here about modding current magicka -13 for some reason. Otherwise, the scripts are identical. This one, on the other hand, is being used in all sorts of dialogue. And if I copy the script name from there and put it into the construction set, I expect we might see the same thing. So this one is fully being used, whereas this one does not appear to be used. And owing to the fact that they're very similar in nature, it leads me to believe that something was done at some point, and then some author or another changed their mind and decided, well, we're not going to do it that way after all. And decided to use this one, but not this one. Now, I could be wrong. This could end up being a mistake on my part, in which case that's what testing is all about. We go through and we test, and we see if something doesn't function according to what it originally did in the original mod. And then we have to do some sleuthing and discover if it's something we've done here or not. But what I would like to do as part of the tidy process is to get rid of detritus. And so if these scripts are in fact not being used, it leads me to wonder, why are they still here? And it's just adding bloat to the whole affair by putting in scripts that are not being used, that are being processed by your CPU as you're playing the game for no apparently good reason. So it's just using up resources, it's using up space, and it's using up energy for no apparently good reason. Now, I wish I had somebody here who was a original author of the mod to tell me, no, don't touch those. You're going to wreck it if you touch those, and they are actually being used somewhere along the line, only it's not evident in your search functions. But I'm going to live dangerously. I'm going to live on the edge, and I'm going to say, after a pretty good assessment of the situation, I've got to say they're probably leftovers. And also you have to gauge in terms of the overall tone of the mod. Well, what has gone on behind the scenes in terms of how it was constructed, and the logistics and the infrastructure that went on behind the scenes to make the mod. Is it consistent with saying, well, yeah, I think they might have left some stuff over that isn't being used just because it seems like an unfinished mod to begin with, right? So putting all those rationales together, I'm going to have to go ahead and say, I'm going to take these out, and we will reduce the number of scripts, we will reduce the overhead, we'll reduce the bloat, and hopefully the mod will work just fine without them, and we will go and test and find out if that is in fact the case in the final analysis. Okay, so away we go. So we're going to take the name of this, put it in our change log. Remember, always the change log. Make a note of the work that you're doing. And under script names, and we'll put it alphabetically. And I'm going to say deleted appears unused. Okay. And I think I'll just copy this little phrase here because it's going to be something that I'll be going back to with other scripts of like. Formulation. Okay. So then we go into the actual work. Bring up scripts. And the amalgamated, it takes a little longer. As you can see, there's just that many more scripts to deal with. And AA underscore non-com something or another. And Wolfcast 2 counterpart over here in the standalone. And I'm just going to verify that I brought up the right scripts, because we don't want to erase anything we don't intend to. That seems to be the unused one there. That seems to be the unused one there. And so I will delete them, and for that I'm going to open up the script just below it. And then I'm going to hit the X mark for delete, and then I'm going to double click on the script just above. And now it's deleted. And we'll verify that. You can see there's a deleted mark after it. Okay. Okay, now let's get into the ones that are being used, seemingly. And we'll see what we want to do for renaming here. I don't see any reason to change the actual body of it, non-com. I will, as I say, add if the name is somehow different from my little truncations here, my little acronyms, I'll make a change there. But otherwise, the only thing I'm really going to be changing is I might take off the cast at the end, because that's probably unnecessary, really, other than to tell you what the script does. But again, if you're really interested, you can refer back to the key. But my interest here is in just making the script name as unique and reasonably expeditious as possible, that let's see here, that it executes as quickly as possible. And yeah, I don't see anything else that's got a non-com or any similar prefix in front of it, so I'm just going to call it non-com and then the character name. Okay, so back to the actual script. Take the name, make a note of our change to it in the key, and it'll be SC for script, LK for locan, non-com, and then my character name, abbreviation, Wolf in this case. And there he goes. Okay, that's probably all we need. Okay, so now we'll take the script, copy it, and I'm going to paste it into MW Edit, which is where I'll do all my editing, because it has a replace feature, whereas the Morrowind actual construction set does not. So I'll use the replace feature to do this mechanically, make sure it goes through accurately. Find next, replace, replace. There we go. And yeah, I probably would have missed that second one had I not done it mechanically. And you have to watch out for things like quote marks appearing around an element name. And so you want to make sure that you change accordingly, get rid of the quote marks if you don't need them, and make sure everything is consistent across the board. Here's where I'm going to start just cleaning up a little bit. I'm taking out all the comments. And if you want the comments, as I say, you can refer back to the original, the working copy of the mod. But in my tidy version, I remove all the comments. And you don't need, most people just aren't interested in that. They're playing the game. They want to play the mod. They don't care what's going on behind the scenes. So you might as well take the comments out and reduce the bloat and overhead in your game. Okay? I don't think I'll even do a fake compile at this point, because I'm changing variable names, and oh, that's interesting. So it's not going to show up correct here anyway. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it right back in. And there's our change. We just basically changed the script name is all. And nothing else has been done at this point. Later on, I'll go through, and I will be going through the scripts with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that everything in the scripts is working correctly, as far as errors, as far as what I consider to be best practices. That will all come later, but right now all I'm doing is the renaming process in the whole overall process of this mod tidying. This is just the renaming portion and nothing else at this point. No error corrections, nothing. Okay, so we're immediately going to get an error because the name shows up twice in the script. It's got to be registered first before it will take upon subsequent saves. And so the second time I save it, it should work okay. And I'll do one more for good measure. Okay, now to the standalone, exact same thing. Whoops, My hand slipped. I hit an arrow instead of the save button. Got a real bad tickle in my throat right now. Sorry, guys. Hope you're all doing well in the middle of this craziness that's going on. I developed a bit of a cough earlier. I doubt if it was related to COVID. It's probably more a residual flu virus that I carry around in my body or something. And so I had a couple of nights there where I went into fits for a couple of hours each time, but nothing beyond that. No fevers or anything. But I still think I have a bit of a tickle in my throat from that. But by and large, I'm feeling pretty good now. I hope you are too. Okay, let's quickly go through and do a couple more, and then I'll pack it in for today as far as the stream goes, and hope that you're satisfied with what we've seen so far. Okay, here's one for Sigstein, I think, if that's his name. Uses info, and again, the one that's got the 2 as a suffix here seems to be unused. So back into here. Construction set verifies that it seems to be unused. So out comes our note to say non-com sig 2. Deleted appears unused. Copy that. Stick it there. Go in and actually delete it. Done. Okay, now bring up the one that is good. And just verify. That one is being used. Make sure I got the correct one here. That one verifies as well. Okay, so there we go. Non-com cast. And we will rename it to say, like the previous one, except I'm going to change the character suffix to SIGs. Now I think it's 16. There seems to be some kind of a obsession with SIGs in this mod. We've got a 16, a Sigrid, and a Sig something else, a Sigbjorn or something. And so we have to be careful that we mean one thing and not the other here. I did get fooled by that earlier in the script where I changed it to be assigned to 16, and I had to go back and redo the script and assign it to the proper character, which was Sigrid, because again, I felt the naming was maybe not as adequate as it could have been, and that combined with my bad eyesight, and I got fooled, and I thought it was one character, and it turned out to be another. So let's be very careful about that. But this should be 16 with the acronym SIGS, because those are the main characters in this mod, and I believe that's what these scripts apply to. So we've got Wolfrun, Sigstein, Lorena, Liot, Fridgir, and Erenbjorn. Those seem to be the main 5 characters that propel this mod along. Okay, so SIGS is the way it's going to be renamed, and now we'll take the actual script and put it into our editor and bring up our replacement name. Hang on, I'm going to do this way. SIGS cast. There we go. And then the new name. Noncom. Whoops. I almost made a boo-boo there. I forgot to take out Wolf. There are Noncom SIGS as opposed to Noncom Wolf. Stick it in there. And away we go. Replace, replace. There we go. Get rid of this junk. And do multiple saves. Done. And I'll do one more and then I'm going to wrap it up. Okay, so that was 16. Now we're going to do Lorena. Okay, and back into the original mod and check, and it does not seem to be used there. And nor do I get any action in the construction set search either. So again, we'll have to say probably not being used. And to some degree, sometimes the construction set is actually reasonably helpful if it detects that the script is actually being used somewhere. It might bring up a little message saying, this script is in use 1 time or 2 times. Are you sure you want to delete it? And so that becomes an extra safeguard, but usually you have to go on sleuthing and finding out that way if you have actually got a script or any other element for that matter in use elsewhere in the mod. Okay, so this should be a good one. Looks good here. looks good there. Okay. So this name is now going to become, I'm going to change it slightly. I'm not thrilled with the way they shortened Lorena's name to LRN. So I made LAUR. That's a little more intuitive because it's more alphabetical than LRN, which puts it ahead of Liot, which is another important character. So it'll be the same as this one, only with LAUR. Like that. Okay, so we take the script over to the editor. Whoops. Paste it in. Refresh our replace dialog. Get the new name. Paste it in. Old name, replace, old name, replace. Done. Take away some of this junk while we're at it. And go back to the original construction set. Paste that in place of the old script name. Again, I point out, look how much longer it takes to save in the amalgamation compared to the standalone. Here it's almost instant. Boom, boom. There we are. Okay, so I hope that is illuminating for everybody. Yippee doopy construction set work, not the most entertaining use of your stream time, I know, but like I say, I'll attempt to download this and post it on YouTube. So if anytime you want to go back in the future and review my processes and my rationales for doing what I'm doing, it'll be there for future use. In the meantime, thank you for watching, everybody, and I hope you're having a good and safe day. Gulp, gulp, gulp. And that you enjoy playing Morrowind, which is still a great game all these years later. We'll see you next time. Maybe tomorrow I'll do some actual gameplay. I've got another character I'm working through, Havish, right now, so we'll see how I feel. But yeah, I'd like to do some gameplay for streaming instead of this dry construction set stuff. So hope we can enjoy that at that time, and maybe you'll join me. Thanks again, and we'll see ya.